Hey there, solar friends. Welcome to this quick video with some updates about direct pay. So, as you probably heard, the direct pay final regulations did get released, and that was on March 5th of 2024. And there's lots of stuff to go over, and you can watch some of our webinars. But I wanted to share a couple of quick updates, in large part because I got an email from a friend, and she said, "Hey, I read through the new final regulations, and it seems like there wasn't really much new." And she was absolutely correct. Not a ton of new information. If you did read the proposed regulations, you basically got an understanding pretty good. It came out pretty close to where the final were. There were some tweaks and a couple, probably three things worth mentioning. One of them is that they expanded the definition a little bit. Instead of just eligibility for 501A entities, they just said, look, everything from 501 to 530, it's all eligible. So a lot of different kinds of nonprofits became eligible. In particular, if you are an HOA and you make a 528 election, you are going to be eligible for direct pay. So if you're watching this from an HOA and uh, you're trying to figure out if we're going to be eligible or not, obviously, if you're a 501c4 or a C7, you're going to be eligible, just like C3s and all the Cs. See everything is eligible, but this expanded definition included a bit more. So what you should do is ask your CPA if we make a 528 election. And if they say, what's a 528 election? Then say, do we file an 1120H form? If you do file one annually, that means you're making the 528 election. So you are going to be eligible subject to all the other restrictions and so forth. And again, it's worth noting that this is all for educational purposes. And we are not providing tax or legal advice, but to the extent that we can share information on updates, we're really happy to do so. There was one upside in the final regulations. If you're a 630 year-end filer, you may have seen our last webinar on 630 year-end filers and the specific sensitivity. It's worth going back and reviewing because direct pay is only available for folks who have their tax year starting in 2023. So if you placed something in service in the beginning of 2023 and your tax year started, like let's say you're a 630 year end, your tax year actually started the year before. So you got to be really careful with the timing. And I'd encourage you to go back and watch that last webinar that explains this in detail. But in the last webinar, I said, Treasury was talking about a fix. They've hinted that there was going to be a paragraph on this. And indeed there was. And they did provide relief to some organizations. So if you're a 630 year-end filer who does not otherwise ordinarily have a filing obligation, so let's say you're a government entity and you're eligible for direct pay, but your tax year started in the prior year because you're a 630 filer. Well, they said that subject to, a bunch of rules that you should go in and review, keeping good bookkeeping records and so forth, that you could elect into a 2023 sort of calendar year. So there were a lot of scenarios, like there were schools who said, look, we put a bunch of buses in service, some of them in the beginning of the year from January to June, some of them from July to the end of the year. And under the proposed regulations, because of this technicality, only the things placed in service from July 1st and on would have technically been eligible. Kind of problematic. And they were going, geez, we kind of missed out here and we didn't expect this, kind of issue for the split year. And so Treasury said, well, for those folks who don't ordinarily file, like a school would be an example, we'll go ahead and let you file for the entire calendar year and claim eligibility in that method, even though it doesn't exactly fit in your current tax year, just this time. And then going forward, then, things will be different next year after some of these things get, worked through the system. So that was really good news. I think that was probably the one highlight for some of those 630 year-end filers. Again, just not everybody, but just the ones who don't have a filing obligation. They did see some relief, and that was great. On the flip side, I guess the third thing, excessive benefits has continued to be uh, problematic for a number of nonprofits. And if you recall from one of our past webinars for excessive benefits, this was essentially that rule that said if your direct pay amount it could be reduced to the extent that that direct pay amount plus any restricted tax exempt amounts exceeds the purchase price. And so there was a lot of confusion and questions about how this is going to work, because it meant if 100% of your project was funded by a grant that was earmarked for solar, then you would not be eligible. And there were ways you got partial eligibility. Unfortunately, those rules remained. There were some that were hopeful that they would be removed. They were there. And in fact, they kind of doubled down on them. It seemed like they were anticipating some folks who might be trying to game the system. For example, they had a grant and it's earmarked for solar. It's a restricted tax exempt amount. Then the rules came out, and the final regulations say that if you got this restricted grant and later you reclassified it as a grant, not that's not restricted, then that's not going to fly. So they didn't say it in those words, but what they said is the determination is made at the time the grant was originally made. Grant or recoverable loan, same kinds of issues. So you can't like retroactively change the character of that restricted tax exempt amount. You're going to have those issues, and that could unfortunately reduce your direct pay eligibility. There was a line also that was interesting that said something to the effect of, if you get a grant after you're placed in service, if you try to game the system by telling your donor, hey, wink, wink, give it to us later, that's not going to work either. That if it's, quote, virtually assured, then potentially that could affect the direct pay eligibility, even if it's done after the fact. So you'll really want to pay close attention to those grant terms when those are written, characterizing them, as the donor see fits, but in compliance with these rules. And that's a conversation you're going to have to walk through, and carefully. So with that, thank you very much for joining this video. And please come check us out at CollectiveSun.com, and look forward to hearing from you.